In the late 1970s, fear gripped the streets of northern England. Women lived in constant dread, communities grew suspicious, and police forces were stretched to their limits. A shadowy predator, later unmasked as Peter Sutcliffe, carried out a brutal spree of murders and violent assaults that would horrify the nation and expose deep flaws in the British criminal justice system. Dubbed the Yorkshire Ripper by the media, Sutcliffe evaded capture for years, leaving a trail of devastation in his wake.
Having given him that name back in the 70s, and it's been used ever since, it somehow, glamorizes, gives him a cult-like status, and it's inspired other killers.
But how did he go undetected for so long? Who were the victims whose lives were taken far too soon, and what mistakes prolonged his reign of terror? In this episode of Seeking Answers, we delve deep into one of the most infamous serial killer cases in British history, to uncover the truth behind the man, the myth, and the catastrophic failures that let him kill again and again.
Never ever broke me. Never ever broke me. I might have had some terrible nightmares. I might have, I'm diagnosed with long-term post-traumatic stress. But he never broke me. He broke my jaw, he broke my skull. He didn't break me. No way.
Peter William Sutcliffe was born on June 2nd, 1946 in Sipley, Yorkshire, though he would grow up in Bingley with his working-class parents John and Kathleen, as well as his siblings Mick, Maureen, Jane, Carl and Anne. Sadly, the pregnancy wasn't easy as Kathleen was a victim of domestic abuse, and it's been reported that the beginning of her motherhood caused her great emotional stress. Due to this, her son was born premature and she remained in hospital for 2 weeks. Peter was raised Catholic, briefly serving as an altar boy, while his father was a member of the choir at the local Anglican church. Things wouldn't get any better as John was a heavy drinker who despised his own wife, stating, quote, "She was a bitch, and the least said about her the better," end quote. On one Christmas day during dinner, he smashed a beer glass over his 5-year-old son Peter's head, merely for sitting in his chair. He disliked his son a great deal, describing him as a, quote, "wimp, always hanging from his mother's apron, a mummy's boy," end quote.
He was out boozing or playing football or rugby or something. He was never in, really. He never had a spare minute from coming home from work. He was back out again, Ignored the family, really. I had some really bad memories, we all did, of my dad, Could be really nasty and drunk, and he was a womanizer. Went back to school and kicked the 7 shades of out of that bully that was bullying me. I had enough of it, and I went back to school as angry as anybody could be, And I went up to him and kicked him and smacked him in the face, and he fell over, and I kicked him again, And the headmaster wanted to know what it was all about, and I said, that's why I've been wagging school for that prat. I said, but I'm not putting up with it any longer. Kept clear of me after that. I really psyched myself up.
In contrast, Kathleen adored Peter and considered him to have been perfect, in which he reciprocated, completely idolising his mother. John would often punish his children by whipping them with a belt, and they described him as a complete monster, which surprised them because John's father, their grandfather, was an incredibly calm and kind man. Peter's younger brother Carl would later state in regards to their father, quote, "The atmosphere in our house would change as soon as he walked in. His life revolved around playing football, cricket, singing in a choir and womanizing," end quote. At one point, John discovered that Kathleen was having an affair. Determined to expose her infidelity to their own children, he posed as her lover in order to lure her over to a hotel, taking their kids along with him to see the truth for themselves. Speaking of his father in later years, Carl stated, quote, "He was having it off with a woman across from us when I was a kid. He moved in with her for a bit. There's probably more of us scattered around Bingley. Probably got brothers and sisters all over," end quote.
You got to do everything you can for your mum, bless her, When they've gone, you've lost them then, haven't you? So you often wish I'd said this or done that. Too late once they've gone, because, they bring you up and everything, don't they? Feed you, clothe you, get you to school and everything, And then some people don't care about the parents' condition or whatever, They just ignore them altogether. And, it's not right, is it? Because, it's important to do as much as you can. You only get one set of parents, don't you?
Over the years, Peter gained an obsession with voyeurism and started to spy on prostitutes with their clients. He left school at the age of 15 and was described as being a loner. He gained a few menial jobs, one of which was a grave digger at Bingley Cemetery. He also reportedly had a dark sense of humour, and co-workers felt like he enjoyed his work far too much, often volunteering to do overtime shifts to wash the corpses. It was around this time when Sutcliffe's behaviour further began to be called into question, and the speculation continues to this day. On April the 22nd, 1966, just after 11:30 am, 66-year-old Fred Craven was murdered with a blunt instrument in his betting office above an antique shop in Wellington Street, Bingley. His wallet containing £200 was also supposedly stolen. At the time, Peter's 16-year-old brother Michael was held on suspicion of being responsible, but he was officially ruled out. Craven lived at 23 Cornwall Road, and Peter Sutcliffe, who was 20 at the time, did know him. The family lived less than 100 yards away at number 57, and allegedly Sutcliffe had also been rejected for a date from Craven's daughter several times in the past as well. Despite this, the true murderer of Fred Craven has never been officially identified.
I tried to ask you once when I was outside, long before I was caught, you know.
Yeah.
Long before I'd actually taken anybody's life out. I tried to drive my car off Alter Rock where the Druids used to sacrifice people.
Oh, right, yeah.
Bingley. There's a big steep rock, and there's all rocks at the bottom where they used to land on them, you know. And I drove my car. I was going to drive over the edge, but it got jammed on a rock sticking up out of the ground.
Yeah.
The car was rocking like a seesaw.
Right.
And I got out and trying to rev it up with my hand on the steering wheel to jump back in again. And it wouldn't grip. And in the end, it took me so long to free the car that I just forgot I just put it out of my mind what I was going to do.
Have you ever thought about it in jail? Or not? Have you ever thought it while you've been inside or anything like that?
No.
It was on Valentine's Day in 1967 when Peter Sutcliffe married 16-year-old Sonia Sersma in a Royal Standard pub on Manningham Lane in Bradford.
I caught her outside college in Bradford, and she looked a bit surprised to see me, and I walked her home, and I was asking her about this person that gave her a lift, and she wouldn't tell me anything because she thought, why don't I trust her, you know? And I told her that Mick had seen her 2 or 3 days before going on through Bingley in the car, and I was really having a go at her, you know, to find out what was going on, and she wouldn't answer. So I thought there was something fishy. She would just couldn't believe that I'd doubt her, you know, because she expected me to trust her, you see. And it was like a bull in a china shop. I should have been a bit more casual about it. So that's what led to me thinking she'd been with somebody, and led me to pick a prostitute up in the first place. I said, I've changed my mind. I don't want to go through with it. So she said, all right, well, you know, it'll still cost you. I said, I don't mind, but I felt more sort of resentful than ever. Then I felt really bad about the situation. I was intending just to have sex with somebody so that I wouldn't be blaming Sonia all the time.
On March the 22nd that year, 27-year-old taxi driver John Tomey picked up Peter Sutcliffe in Leeds, who wanted to be taken to Bingley. They stopped briefly near the destination, which is when Sutcliffe suddenly and violently assaulted him with a hammer to the head. Thankfully, Tomey survived, and when he woke up, he managed to drive away to get help at a nearby cottage. He had suffered a fractured skull with multiple lacerations and a fractured thumb.
Before I was on the mission, you know.
Yeah.
I had voices for 2 years, getting good advice when I got depressed, and thinking about my grandma was buried in the cemetery where I worked and that, you know. She lived with us, we were very close.
Yeah.
And I blamed myself for her death.
Yeah.
Because she was coming down the steps, and we had 2 little kittens, you know, we were playing with them at the bottom of the steps. I was in the kitchen, sat at the table, and I heard a clumping down the steps.
Yeah.
And she was about nearly 80, you know, and a bit unsteady on her feet. And I said, Grandma, be careful. She was nearly at the bottom. I said, there's a kitten playing there. And clump, still kept coming down, you know. And she stepped on one, and all blood came out of its mouth, and she killed it, you know.
Was your gran talking to your head into your Was your gran talking to you in your head, or was it God?
No, it wasn't my grandma, no.
No.
No, I thought at the time it was God, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what did he say?
Oh, all kinds of things, good advice and that, not to get down, and
Yeah.
you weren't responsible for your grandma's death and that, and stop blaming yourself, you know.
Yeah.
But she died about a week after I'd shouted at her, you know.
Yeah.
I'd never raised my voice to her in my life, you know, but it was a shock when I saw her foot come down on the kitten
Yeah.
and crush it, and I
Was
just
it-
shouted, look, you've killed it, and that, you've killed the kitten, I shouted at her, you know.
Yeah.
And she never recovered. Over a week or less than 2 weeks later, she died, you know.
Yeah.
On February the 22nd, 1968, 43-year-old prostitute Mary Judge was found naked, battered to death on a waste ground near the Leeds Parish Church. She was last seen alive outside the Regent Hotel in the city centre. It was believed that rail passengers travelling from Kingston upon Hull may have actually seen the assault take place, as the train passed by the church at Kirkgate at 10:18 around the time of the murder. One small boy on the train did claim to have been a witness, having been around 50 yards away from the scene at the time, and claimed to have seen a tall, slim man with long dark hair beating her to the ground. Though many are convinced that this was the work of Peter Sutcliffe, it has never officially been solved. However, it was the following year when his confirmed hatred and violence against prostitutes officially began.
Then the voice came for the second time. Well, I'd been saying things good for about 2 years, but this time it was giving me advice that wasn't really good, saying that there's a problem in society. Don't you realise why you've had the good advice for 2 years? It's all been leading up to this. You've got a mission to go on and get rid of these people. So that's how it all started, turned from good advice to bad. So that's when I started on the first attack with a sock and a load of pebbles in it, and I hit one on the head. It was a clumsy attack, proving it was my first attempt.
Sutcliffe was in search of a sex worker who had tricked him out of some money. His friend Trevor Birdsal drove him to St Paul's Road in Bradford, unaware of the situation. Sutcliffe headed down the street out of sight, but after a while he came running back out of breath, instructing Birdsal to drive away quickly. He would later admit to having followed the prostitute into a garage and hitting her over the head with a stone that he had hidden inside a sock. The victim survived and noticed the license plate of the vehicle speeding away before reporting it to the police. The authorities visited Sutcliffe's home the next day and he confessed, but only to hitting her with his bare hand. However, the police informed him that he was in fact very lucky, as the woman didn't want to press charges, which unfortunately meant that Peter Sutcliffe was still on the loose. On August the 4th, 1969, 21-year-old Lucy Tinslop left her birthday party at St Mary's Rest Garden on Bath Street in Nottingham before she was violently attacked at around 11:30 p.m. She was raped and strangled, with her abdomen being completely ripped open. Her vagina was also stabbed 20 times, but her murderer was never identified, though many investigators were convinced that it matched Sutcliffe's MO. It was in September, just a month later, when Sutcliffe was arrested for possessing a hammer and was charged with being equipped for stealing, suspecting that he was nothing more than a potential burglar, but sadly, this wouldn't be enough. On June the 13th, 1971, 29-year-old Gloria Booth was found strangled and partially naked in Stonefield Park in Ruislip, West London, after having walked home from work. Sutcliffe was in the area at the time, as his girlfriend Sonia was living in Elperton, but his involvement and the murderer of Gloria have never been definitively proven. In November that year, Peter gained work at the Baird television factory on a packaging line, which he maintained for about a year and a half before ultimately leaving when they asked him to go on the road as a salesman instead. On June the 7th, 1972, 14-year-old Judith Roberts left her home on her bike in Wigington in Staffordshire when she was attacked and murdered. She was found face down, partially hidden beneath some hedge clippings and some plastic fertilizer bags, having suffered 19 wounds to the head and had been battered to death. Initially, 17-year-old Andrew Evans was arrested and convicted for the murder. He spent 25 years in prison for a crime that he didn't commit, and all charges were later dropped as he was finally proven innocent. At the time of the assault, Peter Sutcliffe was driving in the area to visit his fiancée at a hospital in Bexley Heath. He worked night shifts at the time at his new job at the Britannia Works of Anderton International, so he would have needed to return home to Bingley, which wasn't far from the scene of the crime. 4 witnesses claimed to have seen a grey Ford Ford Escort following Judith on the day of the murder, which is the very car that Sutcliffe drove at the time, but this remains unconfirmed. On September the 12th, 1973, 32-year-old legal secretary Wendy Sewell was attacked in Bakewell Cemetery. She was beaten around the head 7 times with what seemed like the handle of a pickaxe, causing severe head injuries and fractures to the skull before she was also assaulted. Initially, Stephen Downing was convicted of the murder, but authors Chris Clark and Tim Tate supposedly found pathology reports indicating that he couldn't have been responsible. However, no new evidence was found, so the authorities concluded that Downing couldn't be ruled out as the suspect, and no definitive evidence could also link Sutcliffe to the crime either.
It's just such a low point in life that you think, well, I'm worthless, nobody thinks anything of me, we've got no contact in the world whatsoever. It's just you in this empty void, and you don't know how to get out. For this huge anticlimax of a decision where he just says, case quash, you almost miss it, and you think, well, is that it? You've waited 27 years and that's all it has to say.
On February the 22nd, 1974, 24-year-old prostitute Rosina Hilliard was found dead at a building site near Humberston Road in Leicester. She had been hit by a car, suffering extensive head injuries as well as fractures to her spine and collarbone. The post-mortem also confirmed that someone had attempted to strangle her. Records later surfaced proving that Sutcliffe was delivering goods to and from the area at the time, but once again he couldn't be positively identified as Rosina's killer. On August 10th, 1974, Peter Sutcliffe married his girlfriend Sonia, who was studying to become a teacher, though she was soon diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. Writer Gordon Byrne would later describe their relationship as domineering, with Sonia being willing to slap down her husband, quote, like a naughty schoolboy, end quote, while Sutcliffe had to occasionally, quote, contain her physically by pinning her arms to her side during her common, unprovoked outbursts of rage, end quote. Journalist Barbara Jones had spent a lot of time with Sonia and described her as, quote, the most irritating, strangest and coldest person I've ever met. She's so incredibly prickly and demanding, end quote.
I suggested she find somebody else. She still keeps coming to see me. She really must have loved me a lot. Most women would have just washed their hands of somebody, but she knew me so well, personality and that she couldn't let go,
She and Peter suffered many miscarriages during their relationship before they were informed that Sonia couldn't have children. She soon resumed her teacher training course, but also began to have an affair with an ice cream van driver. On November the 11th, 1974, 28-year-old Gloria Wood was heading across her school playing field in Bradford between 7:30 and 8 p.m. before she met a man who offered to carry her bags for her. However, he had other plans and suddenly struck her in the head with a claw hammer. Gloria sustained serious injuries to the head, including a depressed skull fracture with a crescent-shaped wound. Thankfully, Gloria survived the attack, though she required surgery to remove the bone shards from her brain. She was found completely drenched in her own blood, and sadly she was unable to provide a photo fit of her attacker, though she described him as being 5'8" with black hair and a beard. Just a few months on, in February 1975, Sutcliffe faced redundancy at work and used half of his payout money to train as an HGV driver. On July the 5th, Peter attacked 36-year-old Anita Rogolski in Keighley as she was walking by herself. He knocked her unconscious with a hammer before slashing her in the stomach with a knife. Thankfully, the assault was cut short when a neighbour interrupted the scene, leading to Sutcliffe fleeing the area. Anita survived the assault, though she required brain surgery and was left psychologically traumatized. Quote, I've been afraid to go out much because I feel people are staring and pointing at me. The whole thing is making my life a misery. I sometimes wish I had died in the attack. End quote. On August the 15th, 1975, Sutcliffe made casual conversation with 46-year-old Olive Smelt in Halifax, discussing the weather, before violently striking her with a hammer to the skull. He then disarranged her clothing before cutting her lower back with a knife. Once again, the assault was interrupted, leading to Sutcliffe fleeing the scene and leaving Smelt badly injured but still alive. She was left with severe emotional and mental trauma.
Oh, you can hit the headlines all right, but it's nothing to be proud of, the things that you do. And I just don't know how you can sleep at night.
Of all the women you've killed, I think, if you were to take a census of them all, I think, given the opportunity to do as you wish with them, I think they would rate you pretty low sexually. I think that's what it's all about. You're proving you're a man by killing them. Most men don't have to kill women to prove that they're a man. Let's talk about real crimes, organising bank robberies and so on. I think you will be really a non-runner. It has to be women, and it has to be from behind.
Once questioned, she informed Detective Superintendent Dick Holland that her attacker had a Yorkshire accent, which could have led authorities to Peter Sutcliffe a lot sooner. Sadly, however, this information wasn't followed up on and was lost in the investigation.
Some of these women did actually say to the police, "You've got this wrong," and the police weren't interested, and eventually they went back to Olive Smelt towards the end of the inquiry and asked if they could hypnotise her to see if she remembered anything else, and she said, "What's the point? You don't believe what I actually remembered conscious."
Furthermore, even more vital clues were damaging the case. Due to the similarities between Sutcliffe and the infamous Jack the Ripper, with them both seemingly targeting prostitutes, Peter was dubbed by investigators the Yorkshire Ripper.
I saw those headlines on the front pages of many papers. I'm not going to use the word, but it begins with R, the Yorkshire R. And it said, well, over and over again, repetition, big bold letters using that term. Please, media, journalists, producers, whoever, please bear in mind that that word, it serves to re-traumatise us families left behind. Because it's a description of how our loved ones, how they were, maimed, how the injuries were inflicted. So every time that word is used, that's what it does for us. It does not put us at the heart of what you do. So I request today to cease using that term. Use his name if you need to report stories about him. His name is Peter Sutcliffe.
However, Olive Smelt and Anita Rogowski weren't attacked in red light areas where prostitutes operated. Due to this, both of these victims were ruled out as being connected to the Yorkshire Ripper. It was on August the 27th, 1975 when Sutcliffe attacked 14-year-old Tracy Brown from behind as she walked down a country lane in Silsden. For a recurring theme, the assault was cut short as a passing car drove past and its headlights scared Sutcliffe away. Tracy survived but required brain surgery.
When I hit her on the head and it didn't knock her out, it was only a stick. And I threw her over a wall and said, "You'll be okay, I'm going," because I realised that she wasn't a prostitute. She seemed fairly young, but I didn't know how young she was. I heard the voice saying, no, it's a mistake. Stop. So I just said, "Oh, you'll be all right, I'm going now," and that was it.
Though he wouldn't be convicted of this attack, he would later confess to being responsible, and she did manage to pick out Peter as her attacker, admitting to have been charmed by him at first and not being the least bit frightened. Quote, "We had walked together for almost a mile for about 30 minutes, and I never once felt intimidated or in danger." End quote. It was on October the 30th, 1975, when 28-year-old Wilma Mary McCann was last seen at around 7:30 p.m. walking past the Prince Philip playing fields in Leeds. Peter Sutcliffe suddenly attacked her from behind, striking her in the back of the head with a hammer to kill her. Despite an extensive investigation and 150 West Yorkshire police officers interviewing around 11,000 people, this murder remained unsolved for years.
It's like I'd been born into some kind of movie. It was just, up until Mum dying, I was just like everybody else, and it's just been so surreal that it was done in this public way. And I've never, for many years, and until about 15 years ago, I was embarrassed about being associated with Sutcliffe and his crimes.
Emily Monica Jackson was a 42-year-old who was facing financial peril, leading to her husband convincing her to enter prostitution, using the van of their family roofing business. On January the 20th, 1976, Peter Sutcliffe picked her up outside the Gaiety pub on Roundhay Road, before driving around half a mile to some derelict buildings on Enfield Terrace in the Manor Industrial Estate. He then struck her on the head with a hammer before dragging her body into a yard strewn with rubbish. He proceeded to violently stab her with a used, sharpened screwdriver in the neck, chest and abdomen. He continued the murder by stamping on her thigh so hard that it left an impression of his boot. On March the 5th, 1976, Sutcliffe was fired from his job when he was caught stealing used tyres, and 2 months later on May the 9th, he attacked 20-year-old Marcella Claxton in Roundhay Park, who was 4 months pregnant at the time. She was walking home from a party before Sutcliffe picked her up to give her a lift home. En route, she requested to stop to urinate, which is when Peter struck her from behind with a hammer. Thankfully, she survived, though she miscarried her baby and required multiple extensive brain operations, suffering from intermittent blackouts and chronic depression for the years that followed. Sutcliffe remained unemployed until gaining work in October of 1976 as an HGV driver of T&WH Clark Holdings Limited on the Canal Road Industrial Estate in Bradford. He reportedly began to pay for prostitutes and supposedly began to suffer from bad experiences with them, which spurred on his hatred for sex workers. Allegedly, he had been conned out of money from one of them and her pimp. Though there was no evidence found of him ever hiring a prostitute personally, most accounts did confirm that he had an obsession with watching them on the streets of Leeds and Bradford. On February the 5th, 1977, 28-year-old prostitute Irene Richardson left her rooming house on Cowper Street in Leeds, heading for pub and disco venue Tiffany's. At some point after 11:15 p.m, she was bludgeoned to death with a hammer before being stabbed in the neck and throat, followed by 3 more times in the stomach. After she was dead, the corpse was then mutilated with a knife before her knee-length boots were carefully placed over the back of her thighs.
At first, I was completely devastated to find, first of all, that I'm not going to be able to make contact with my mum, but that she'd been murdered, and that was, like a double blow as well, which I kind of, it took me some time to come to terms with, but eventually I thought, I need to put this to rest now. I need to find out what I can and the situation and the circumstances, which is when I knew a name, and what happened was that I went to Google one day and I thought I'll put in a name and just see. I thought, well, she's been murdered, there must be some information out there that's going to be traceable. So I searched on Google and Mum's picture came up in the search results, and that's when I found out everything else.
Finally, it led to a possible lead as some tyre tracks were found leading away from the crime scene, now listing possible vehicles driven by the murderer. On March the 22nd, 1977, 29-year-old prostitute Barbara Young from Doncaster was attacked and bludgeoned to death. Witnesses claimed that the culprit was a tall, dark-haired man. It was concluded that she had died from a massive hemorrhage caused by a fractured skull, but authorities weren't convinced that this was from the same killer. She had been attacked from the front and not the back, which didn't match the other murders. Some reports claim that Sutcliffe was later questioned about this killing, but it officially remains unsolved. On April the 21st, 1977, 18-year-old Deborah Marie Schlesinger was walking down her garden path at her Hawksworth home after a night out with some friends before being attacked and stabbed through her heart. After the assault, the perpetrator followed her until she collapsed and then died in her doorway. Some witnesses claim to have seen a dark, bearded man near the scene of the crime, but again, whether Sutcliffe was responsible or not has often been speculated. A knife was used this time and not a hammer, though Sutcliffe had done this previously. His work record did prove that he was delivering to an engineering plant just 100 yards away from her home on the day that she was killed. However, the authorities were still convinced that the murderer was only targeting prostitutes, and since Deborah wasn't one, it was at the time determined to have not been connected. Years later, the West Yorkshire police did consider finally charging Sutcliffe with the murder, but no further action was ever taken, and it officially remains unsolved.
West Yorkshire Police to finally do the right thing and give us another little bit of closure that we can have and deserve, and that is to apologise for the way in which they spoke about some of the victims who, including my mum, were less than innocent. When Jane MacDonald, a 16-year-old girl who we knew, by the way, was killed, it was said by the police that he's killed an innocent victim now. My mum and all those other women were completely innocent and deserved to live. And so I would ask them to consider my invitation to make that apology.
The attitude at the time was they were all prostitutes. And whilst, yes, some did make a living that way, they were people, they were real people, they had families, there were reasons for it.
On April the 23rd, 1977, Sutcliffe picked up 32-year-old prostitute Patricia Atkinson Mitra in Manningham in Bradford, offering to drive her home. He then suddenly attacked her from behind to knock her out before pulling down her clothes to expose her body. He then stabbed her 6 times in the stomach with a knife to kill her. It was on June the 25th when 16-year-old Jane Michelle MacDonald headed out to the German-style Bierkeller Hofbrauhaus in Leeds to meet some friends. Upon return, she missed the last bus, so instead she went back to a friend's house to wait for their sister to drive her home. However, after 45 minutes of waiting, she gave up and decided to just walk her own way back. She managed to reach Reginald Street at around 2 AM before she was attacked and killed by Peter Sutcliffe after being hit on the head 3 times with a hammer and stabbed in the chest and back. Her body was found by some children at around 9:45 AM on a playground between Reginald Terrace and Reginald Street. She was found with a broken bottle deeply embedded inside her chest.
I just see you as a beast with no feelings, and you're a coward. Why do you come up and stalk young girls, innocent girls as well? You come up from behind them, they don't have a chance. You're not a man, you're a beast. And I hate you. And I believe all the population in Leeds and everywhere hate you.
Jane was a beautiful girl. You took life from her. You destroyed her family in one way or another. Her father just deteriorated. You're not a man. You're despicable. I despise you intensely.
I've had a good friend of mine, her son, come running and saying, Uncle Will's crying, and they'd never seen my husband cry before, you see. He said, and there's some big men in, there could be policemen, he says, and he's crying, so I knew it could only be connected with Jane. She was the only one not in the house, you see. And when the police said, are you Mr. MacDonald, Jane MacDonald's father, and he said yes. He says, and wait while she comes in, I'll kill her for not ringing. So they said, you won't have to do, somebody's done it for you.
On July the 10th, 43-year-old Maureen Long left a nightclub and headed home in Bradford. She stopped to urinate before being attacked by Sutcliffe, who violently struck her on the head. By the time she was discovered, she was suffering from hypothermia and spent 9 weeks in hospital, but she did survive. However, many witnesses misidentified Sutcliffe's car at the time, so over 300 police officers were investigating thousands of the wrong vehicle without any success.
I've got a plate in my head and a bit of some of my skull missing and stab wounds at front of my stomach and stabbed in the back.
Someone wants to get hold of you and do the same things to you as well. And which it might do. If they come face to face with you. You'd be better off killing yourself before someone else does it.
Pretty soon, Sonia finally completed her teacher training course before using her salary to buy them both a house at 6 Garden Lane in Heaton on September the 26th. On October the 1st, 1977, Peter Sutcliffe picked up 20-year-old prostitute and mother of 2 Jean Bernadette Jordan on Moss Side in Manchester. They arrived on Princess Road before he knocked her out with 1 blow to the head before striking her 10 more times to kill her. However, Sutcliffe may have made a vital mistake. He dumped the body behind Southern Cemetery, but then remembered that he had previously given her a £5 note, which was brand new and therefore traceable. He soon returned to the cemetery to dispose of the body and hide the evidence, but the £5 note was nowhere to be found. The body wasn't discovered until 8 days later when local dairy worker and future actor Bruce Jones was searching for some house bricks before making the grisly discovery, and he also found the £5 note hidden in a secret compartment of Jean's handbag.
I found Jean Jordan, the most horrific body he'd mutilated. Yeah. I had an allotment with a friend I worked with, and we bought a big second-hand shed. So I decided to get the wheelbarrow, hammer and chisel, waste ground over there, get the bricks for the base of the shed. And I'd rolled my barrow over this girl 5 times. I'd gone over her. As I went back the 6th time, it had all been moved and she was there. And I didn't realise at first it was a body. I thought it was a tailor's dummy that had been, you know, one of these tailor's dummies you see in your life. And I shouted my mate over, and another guy came over with his little Jack Russell. I remember that day as vividly now as it was then. I ran over the road, phoned the police, 999. Within minutes, there was that many police cars there, you wouldn't believe it. I got put into a police van, taken away.
Because it is incredibly traumatic to come across such a scene, isn't it?
It wasn't traumatic. It is. I mean, she had her hair burnt, face smashed in, disemboweled. I had nightmares for 12 months. Still do. Still do. I walked away from. I didn't get in trouble. There was a young copper in a police station who sat me in a canteen and had a cup of tea. And he said, normally the person who's found the body is the one that's done it. And I just lashed out at him.
You hit him?
Yeah, and the lady poured in the tea in the canteen, heard him, and then the sergeant come running, and the policeman come running. And she said, no, hang on, it's what he said to him. He's gone through enough, this lad. And you shouldn't be saying things like that.
But how did you feel in those moments when you realised that they were considering you as a suspect?
You start thinking, where was I? What have I done wrong? What? Your mind starts racing. You're
panicking.
It's pure panic. You can't. Your mind is going and going and going, and you're thinking, Jesus, did I do this? And was I? People looked at you funny. Did he murder her? Did he do it? Is he the Ripper? And I thought I was strong enough to deal with all this, you know. And you're not. You're not strong.
For your wife, this must have been.
She didn't know for 12 hours where I was. They wouldn't inform her where I was at first. They didn't.
When she discovered what had happened, what was her feeling?
She knew obviously I wasn't a murderer. She knew I was doing that, but I never knew how she felt. We never really. We were drifted apart by then, in a way that.
Do your kids know about all this?
They know some of it. They don't know all of it. No one does. About you now. I've seen things I wish I'd never seen in my life before. I live in a comfort zone. I didn't need bringing out that comfort zone.
Your wife left. I mean, everything collapsed around you.
I went away. Yeah, I went away. I left 2 children with my mother.
So everything in the following year just collapsed for you.
Yeah, just nothing.
You had to run away from it all.
Yeah, I just ran away. Yeah, I ran away. I had to get away from it. It was my 2 children that kept me going, I think. If I'd have had them, I think I'd have ended it all. I'd have gone.
The £5 note was traced to 2 branches of Midland Bank in Bingley and Shipley. This narrowed the entire investigation down to 8,000 employees who would have received the money in their wages. Investigators spent 3 months questioning over 5,000 of the employees, including Peter Sutcliffe, but they found his story credible and he was discarded as a potential culprit.
They thought they'd got him. I mean, one lad said to me, he said, well, you know, we think this is him, and took him away. Peter came back about 5 o'clock, and because we asked him what happened, they said that they'd interviewed him further, questioning him of his whereabouts and what he did, and they took some of his clothes away for forensic tests, and they gave him a saliva test as well. It used to be a joke that he was nicknamed the Ripper, and he used to answer to that sometimes. So it was, it's rather sort of. But it's sad now, isn't it?
We are absolutely delighted with developments at this stage. Absolutely delighted.
Can you all smile?
Really delighted. George is delighted as well.
Just the next day, 20-year-old Carol Wilkinson was violently bludgeoned to death with a stone in Bradford. Initially, it was believed that this was another murder from the Yorkshire Ripper, but this was then ruled out again because she wasn't a prostitute. By the time authorities realised that the Ripper wasn't only targeting sex workers, Anthony Steele was already convicted of the murder, but he always maintained his innocence. According to crime writer David Yallop, he was convicted on weak evidence and only confessed under intense questioning on the condition he could see a solicitor afterwards. The confession failed to include any genuine details of the killing, and investigators admitted that they didn't find the confession credible at the time. Professor David G., the Home Office pathologist who had conducted the post-mortem of all of the Ripper victims, followed suit, and he did note similarities between this killing and his later crimes. Sutcliffe would never confess to the killing of Wilkinson, but Steele was already sentenced for murder at the time, and supposedly Peter always showed particular anxiety whenever Wilkinson was mentioned. Sutcliffe was known acquaintances with Wilkinson and had previously got into a confrontation with her stepfather over making advances towards her. He was also familiar with the council estate where she was killed and often visited the area. Months earlier, he was reported to the police for acting suspiciously on the street where she lived, and on the day of the murder, he had returned to mutilate the body of Jean Bernadette Jordan before returning to Bradford, so he would have been nearby at the time. The murder took place not far from where he worked, and it was proven that he did clock in for his shift that afternoon. It wasn't until decades later when Steele's conviction was finally quashed, concluding that he suffered from a low IQ and that his mental capabilities made him vulnerable, finally discrediting his previous confession. Many are convinced that Peter Sutcliffe was the real murderer, especially considering the fact that her body was posed and partially stripped, much like his other victims. But officially, it remains unconfirmed. It was on November the 12th, 1977 when the British public decided to take a stand. 11 marches were conducted in various towns across the country to encourage women to be able to walk anywhere without any restriction and to not be blamed for the violence caused by men.
They warn women who've been going out armed with knives and sharpened steel combs that they do risk arrest for carrying offensive weapons.
The lady in the bed opposite, she said, "What did you do to deserve that?" Which was a really strange thing to say, but it shows that there was this kind of misogyny, and it must have been a man who hated you. You'd done something wrong, you've done something to deserve it.
It shows you what they'd written about some of them being innocent. They were all innocent.
So the women of Leeds decided to do a Reclaim the Night march, and we went out and marched through the streets and said that it's in fact the men that should be put into to keep at home and not the women. And it was quite a magnificent and very empowering statement which was broadcast nationally.
Sadly, this didn't deter Sutcliffe, who, on December the 14th, attacked 25-year-old prostitute Marilyn Moore in the back of his car on some wasteland in Scott Hall. Thankfully, Peter made a mistake and lost his balance during the assault, which allowed Moore to escape with her life, albeit suffering severe head injuries along the way. Upon investigation, the tyre tracks were found at the scene of the crime, which matched the previous attack. Moore was able to provide a photo fit, which bore a strong resemblance to Peter Sutcliffe, and matched earlier descriptions of the unnamed assailant as well. She was also able to describe his black sunbeam rapier, which had been seen in many of the red light areas as well. Though Sutcliffe was interviewed at this point, he was still not charged and was completely disregarded as a potential suspect yet again. By January 1978, investigators officially called off the search for the person who had received the mysterious £5 note. On January the 21st, Peter Sutcliffe attacked and murdered 21-year-old prostitute Yvonne Ann Pearson from Bradford after repeatedly bludgeoning her in the head with a ball-peen hammer. He then jumped on her chest and shoved horsehair down her mouth that he had retrieved from a discarded sofa. Once she was finally out of her pain and misery, he hid her body underneath the same sofa near Lum Lane. Just 10 days later, 18-year-old prostitute Elena Riker, though her friends referred to her as Helen, from Huddersfield became the next victim. Sutcliffe struck her on the head 5 times as she exited her vehicle at the Garrard's timber yard. He proceeded to strip most of her clothes from her body, only leaving her bra and polo neck jumper. Sutcliffe then assaulted the corpse, which was the only known time he had ever done so. However, she was still alive and managed to climb back to her feet before Sutcliffe repeatedly struck her over the head with a hammer before stabbing her several times through the heart and lungs with a knife. Her remains were found just 3 days later behind a stack of timber, hidden underneath a sheet of asbestos beneath some railway arches of the timber yard. He would later state, quote, "I had the urge to kill any woman. The urge inside me to kill girls was now practically uncontrollable," end quote. As if the case wasn't already difficult enough to solve as it is, things were made much worse when the authorities received an anonymous tape, supposedly from the killer, taunting Assistant Chief Constable George Oldfield of the West Yorkshire Police.
"I'm Jack. I see you are still having no luck catching me. I have the greatest respect for you, George, but Lord, you are no nearer catching me now than 4 years ago when I started. I reckon your boys are letting you down, George. They can't be much good, can they? The only time they came near catching me was a few months back in Chapeltown, when I was disturbed. I warned you in March that I'd strike again. Sorry it wasn't Bradford. I'm not quite sure when I'll strike again, but it will be definitely sometime this year. I am not sure where. Maybe Manchester. I like it there. There's plenty of them knocking about. They never learn, do they, George? I bet you've warned them, but they never listen. Well, it's been nice chatting to you, George. Yours, Jack the Ripper.
It was because of this tape the police began to search for a man with a Wearside accent, focusing on the Castletown area of Sunderland, Tyne or Ware.
I believe it's the right thing. They were distracting the police and leading them astray, and I believed it all the time. He was protecting the mission, you know. And he kept saying to me, look after the mission. Don't tell anybody or anything. Don't even tell Sonia or your mother. Between you and your creator. So I told nobody. God was in charge. He was conducting everything, and I knew everything would be all right. He misled the police several times, and I just knew it was a miracle happening every time, you know.
I did send it.
Just repeat that for me. What did you say?
I did send the letter.
Tell me all about it, John.
Later on, in June, I sent it to you. It's got my voice on.
The killer was now nicknamed Wearside Jack, who even sent 2 letters in March of 1978 to the Daily Mirror, now bragging about his crimes, signing them off as Jack the Ripper. He claimed to have been responsible for the November 1975 murder of 26-year-old Joan Harrison in Preston.
Well, I just read about that Preston murder. I didn't do it.
Okay.
That's what you think.
No, go on. You tell me what you know about it, or what
Well, I just got out of the paper. Like everything out the paper.
Which papers were you getting in 1978?
Usually the Mirror.
What was the purpose of it, John?
Do you know? Because I thought he might have done it. You know, because he was gone about killing everybody, wasn't he? I thought Sutcliffe might have done it.
This person knew specific details of the crime scenes that investigators claimed weren't public knowledge at the time, but it turned out that this entire thing was a complete hoax.
What was eerie like, wasn't it?
It is, isn't it?
Must have been mad.
Why do you say that?
I felt crap.
Why do you feel crap?
Like for putting the coppers off, in a way. Well, I said that on the tape, didn't I? I did have respect for him. I felt sorry for him anyway. Because his coppers' mates were letting him down, and he was turning older by the day. So I thought I was doing him a favour, making the coppers look harder. And they did, they caught him.
For 27 years, these letters and audio tape remained unsolved, but decades later the DNA was taken from the envelopes which entered the national database and matched only 6% of the UK population. This led investigators to unemployed alcoholic John Samuel Humble, who lived in Sunderland, just a few miles away from Castletown. Thankfully, his DNA had been collected just a few years earlier due to a drunken disorderly offence.
I panicked when the coppers were raking all over Castletown, where I live on the other side of the river.
Did they knock on your door, John?
No, I didn't get anywhere near me.
You were never seen throughout the inquiry when they spent all that time in Sunderland?
Not once.
How old were you?
I couldn't believe it.
Pardon?
I couldn't believe it.
Why couldn't you believe it?
I didn't, because they were checking it. They checked the bloke next door.
It also turned out that the information he provided about the crime scenes was public knowledge, and that he had actually gotten them simply from newspaper articles on the case. Once this was discovered, he was charged with perverting the course of justice and sentenced to 8 years in prison, before passing away on July the 30th, 2019 at the age of 63.
There was nothing stopping you, John, from picking up the phone and saying, my name is John Humble. Come and see me at my address. I've made this tape.
I wasn't gonna give myself away. I just let them know it was a hoax.
So before that you were quite happy to go along with this hoax, were you?
But not after I sent the tape. Because it was getting on my nerves. It was on the bloody telly all the time.
However, due to this audio tape, Peter Sutcliffe was even more in the clear than ever, as his voice didn't match, and they were all looking in the complete opposite direction.
I shouldn't have done it and all that.
Why shouldn't you have done it, John?
Because it's evil.
Why is it evil, John?
Well, it sounds evil anyway, doesn't it?
It certainly sounds evil, but why is it evil?
I don't know. It just sounds it.
Well, it's evil because it diverted the police into the northeast, John. That's the reason, isn't it?
Oh, I did, like. I didn't realise at the time. I didn't cotton on. I forgot about the axe being a Geordie. I should have cottoned on to that.
During this time, Sutcliffe was interviewed twice more. Despite matching several forensic clues and being on the list of 300 names of those connected to the mysterious £5 note, he didn't sound like the man on the tape, so he was again discarded as a suspect.
Why did you send that to the Daily Mirror, John?
Publicity.
What kind of publicity?
Notoriety.
For who?
For me.
On May the 16th, 1978, 40-year-old prostitute and mother of 7 Vera Evelyn Millwood left her flat in Hume at around 10 p.m, informing her boyfriend that she was going to buy some cigarettes. But sadly, she would never return. She was picked up by Peter Sutcliffe, who drove her to the parking compound of the Manchester Royal Infirmary in Chorlton on Medlock. Once she exited the vehicle, Sutcliffe attacked her with a hammer. He proceeded to slash her across the stomach before repeatedly stabbing her with a screwdriver. Once she was dead, he dragged her body against a fence and continued the assault, this time with a knife. At some point that year, Peter's mother Kathleen passed away from a heart attack, never finding out exactly what her son was doing behind closed doors. On March 2nd, 1979, 22-year-old Irish student Anne Rooney was attacked from behind at Horsforth College. According to David G., she was struck 3 times on the head, and the weapon was most likely a hammer. Thankfully, she survived. She was able to describe her attacker and his vehicle, both of which matched Sutcliffe and his sunbeam rapier, which had already been previously flagged to police several times in many red light areas across Leeds and Bradford in the past. Peter Sutcliffe would later admit to being the assailant, but he was never charged as it was considered not in the public's interest to add any more charges against the man.
Makes me really cross, actually. Just, that is outrageous. Well, we got him in prison. Well, he's killed so many women. Well, the others have survived, and these possible other names. What's it to them? They're all right. They're alive. We don't need to go over this, do we? Because it's all done and dusted.
On April the 4th at 11:55 p.m, Peter Sutcliffe murdered 19-year-old clerk Josephine Ann Whittaker as she walked home in Savile Park Motor in Halifax. He struck her from behind with a hammer before continuing the assault on the ground. He then proceeded to stab her with a screwdriver 21 times in the chest and stomach and 6 times in the right leg, before thrusting the weapon into her vagina. Her skull was later found fractured from ear to ear.
You are the lowest of the low. You did mention, I believe it was in your tape to the police, that you wanted to be mentioned in the Guinness Book of Records. I'll go along with that. You should be classed as the biggest coward the world has ever known. Put that in the Guinness Book of Records.
I think you're probably a very inadequate person, certainly physically, and probably mentally too. You're not significant at all. I don't think you can make a relationship with a woman, certainly not a live one. Possibly the only relationship you can make is with a dead one, as you've proved.
People are frightened of the deeds you do. But you are probably a very insignificant little man.
Every living person curses you. You can't even dig a hole for yourself because people would come and find you and drag you out.
I wonder who you think you are. Do you damn well think you're God or something? God give life, God taketh it away, not you. I think you are the devil itself.
Peter Sutcliffe is a strange one because...
Is that the mass murderer?
Yeah, the Yorkshire Ripper.
Yeah.
And he says something really strange because he goes on about the last murder because he was just murdering prostitutes. And I actually knew one of his victims who got away. And he allegedly murdered one girl who was totally out of the profile. Wasn't a prostitute, was a young girl. And when they interviewed him, he was saying something like, I didn't want to kill her, but my master was telling me to kill. And they always said it was God telling him, but he never identified it as God. He said, my master was telling me, I looked up and my master was telling me to kill. And he whacked her head in with a hammer. And there was rumours that was Savile. was telling him to kill, and the body was found in Roundhay Park near to Saville's residence.
Jimmy Saville, I believe, was an accomplice of Peter Sutcliffe, the man, if you can call him that, the monster, who was eventually arrested and charged with the murders of 13 women.
Bear in mind, one of the bodies was found in Alderhay Park, where Saville's got a residence, in the flats in Alderhay Park.
Overlooking the grass, isn't it?
Everything, yeah, and the body was found there. And I think one of them didn't match the profile of... And Sutcliffe, when he's interviewed, he said, I didn't want to kill it, I didn't want to kill it. And this is where he blames God. And he looked up and it's something like, Master told me to do it. And I'm thinking, is that Master, or was that Saville telling him to do it? And bear in mind their relationship, you know, the proximity of where they both lived. I think that was a joint venture, and that was Saville.
I didn't interview Saville. I can't recall who did, but certainly it was mentioned that he had been put forward as a suspect. And, you know, that I forget now how it came to our attention. I think it was an anonymous source, but knowing what is known now, the person putting forward Saville was aiming in the right direction. It came to my attention that he had been put forward as a suspect. I believe he was living in the Bellevue area then, Bellevue Road area with his mother, in the flat up there, I think, but it's over 30 years ago.
They found the tire marks of Sutcliffe's car, and the body had been moved several times around and almost placed in a ritualistic manner within spitting distance of Saville's apartment, and Saville was absolutely home that evening.
He was interviewed and eliminated. I don't know how he was eliminated.
On August the 28th, 1979, 32-year-old prostitute Wendy Jenkins was murdered in Bristol. She was violently stabbed and beaten to death. Her partially buried body was discovered in the sandpit of a building site. Though the crime scene bore some similarities to the Yorkshire Ripper, there's no definitive evidence that Sutcliffe was responsible. On September the 1st, at around 1 AM, Peter Sutcliffe murdered 20-year-old Bradford University social psychology student Barbara Janine Leach. She simply left a pub and walked past Sutcliffe before he randomly attacked her with a hammer. He then dragged her to the backyard of 13 Backash Grove behind a low wall into an area where the dustbins were kept. He exposed her breasts and pulled her jeans down before stabbing her with a screwdriver. He continued to cover her remains with a piece of carpet, placing stones on top before finally fleeing the scene. Once she was discovered, the public were on high alert as it was yet another victim who wasn't a prostitute.
If I were you, I'd look over your shoulder. Somebody's looking for you. Many people are looking for you. And they all hate you.
I just think you're an obscenity on the face of the earth, and the sooner that you're caught and put away, it can't be soon enough for me. They should lock you away and throw away the key and forget about you for the rest of your life.
You hit them from behind. You're a coward.
That very same day, 25-year-old trainee teacher Alison Morris was killed in Ramsey in Essex. This was just 6.5 hours after the confirmed killing of Barbara Leach over in Bradford, which was 200 miles away. Morris had been stabbed multiple times as she walked down a footpath along the Stour Brook, 250 yards from her home on Rabness Road. It's believed that Peter Sutcliffe certainly had enough time to have been in Essex before returning to Bradford for the other murder, but this officially remains unsolved. On October the 11th, 1979, 21-year-old journalist Yvonne Mishleweek was crossing the footbridge at Ilkley railway station before being violently attacked from behind. Fortunately, the assault was interrupted by a rail passenger. Yvonne managed to survive with severe head injuries, and she was able to describe her attacker as being in his 30s with a dark, swarthy, square face and crinkly hair, all of which matched Peter Sutcliffe's description. On December the 1st, 24-year-old Sally Shepherd was making her way home to Friary Road at night after exiting a bus from Peckham in South London. Once leaving the vehicle, she was clubbed unconscious, assaulted and violently beaten to death. The killer then dragged her body through a wire fence before leaving her at the back of Peckham Police Station on Staffordshire Street. This case was extremely similar to the Ripper's confirmed killing of Yvonne Pearson a year earlier. Furthermore, his wife Sonia's teacher training course was in Deptford nearby, and Sutcliffe would often visit her, but his direct involvement in the killing remains officially unconfirmed.
Sutcliffe had power over the other victims that weren't disclosed by the police, and he enjoyed that power.
It was on June the 26th, 1980 when Peter Sutcliffe was arrested for drink driving, and his trial was due to start in the middle of the following January, but this wouldn't stop his murder spree in the meantime. On August the 12th, 1980, 31-year-old prostitute Gertie Jensen was found dead on a Gothenburg building site, followed by 26-year-old Teresa Thorling on August the 30th, found in an entrance to a building in Malmö with severe head injuries. Both murders were compared to Sutcliffe's MO as they matched his charged brutality. Both women were Swedish, and Sutcliffe's name did appear on a manifest of a ferry between Malmö and Dragör across the Öresund Strait, despite there being no evidence of Sutcliffe having ever even visited Sweden. On August the 20th, Peter Sutcliffe murdered 47-year-old civil servant Marguerite Walls after she left her office between 9:30 and 10:30 to walk home in Farsley. He knocked her out with a hammer to the back of the head whilst calling her a filthy prostitute. He proceeded to tie a length of rope around her neck before tightening it to drag her 20 yards up a driveway into a high-walled garden. He then suffocated the woman before removing all of her clothes except for her tights. He finally covered some of her body with grass and leaves and fled the scene. It was on September the 24th when Sutcliffe followed an unnamed 34-year-old doctor from Singapore into a Headingley alley after meeting some friends. He then struck her on the head to knock her unconscious. He tied a rope around her neck and began dragging her along the street before being interrupted and again running away into the night. On October the 25th the following month, Sutcliffe attacked 21-year-old art student Maureen Lee, who was visiting a pub with some friends in Chapeltown. She took a shortcut down a dark street to try to catch a bus home before being assaulted. She suffered significant wounds, including a puncture hole in the back of her fractured skull, a fractured cheekbone, a broken jaw, and numerous other scratches and bruises, but still survived.
This voice came out from behind me to the right of the road, and it was very friendly. Hey, you know, I was like, oh, maybe it's someone from the pub who wants to know the way, or someone from a friend or somebody, because, you know, I knew lots of people around the university. So I turned round and he started chatting, and I realised I didn't recognise him at all.
Then I sensed real danger because I heard his footsteps following me, and I was heading for the end of the road. And as I walked faster, I could hear his footsteps getting faster and faster. And then sheer panic took over. And I started to run towards the end of the road. And as I ran, I could feel his steps getting nearer and nearer and nearer, so close behind me. I had the hairs on the back of my neck standing up, and my knees went to jelly. And then I felt this massive blow to the top of my head. And I just saw the ground coming up towards me, and I was made completely unconscious.
I'm really lucky to be here. He hit me over the head with a hammer. He put 2 screwdrivers to the back of the base of my spine, just missed my spinal cord. Smashed me again on the side of the head. My cheekbone was fractured, my skull was fractured, my jaw was completely broken open, and I lay in a pool of blood in the gutter. And I think he was going to have his final blow when a passerby at the end of Woodhouse Road turned round and he saw her and decided to run it.
My parents, when they did eventually come to see me, walked past the end of the bed because they didn't recognise me. So I'm looking out through this mask of horror, but I couldn't see it. But everyone around me was looking at me as saying, what has happened to you?
You're having a nightmare about Peter Sutcliffe, the Yorkshire Ripper, coming to finish you off.
The police, in their wisdom at the time, so they thought it would be best to really play down my attack, because they were being heavily criticised by the media and the public and the government for not being able to find this serial killer. So they said it wasn't him. To me, it couldn't have been him. It was just a random attack. But that was to help them show that they weren't incompetent. So they played it right down and said it definitely wasn't the Yorkshire Ripper.
He didn't slow down, however, as just 11 days later, Sutcliffe attacked 16-year-old Teresa Sykes in Huddersfield while she was going to the shop in Oaks. Peter attacked her from behind, but her screams soon alerted her boyfriend, who came to her rescue and scared Sutcliffe away. She survived, but required brain surgery to help nurse her injuries. On November the 17th, he killed 20-year-old student Jacqueline Hill, who was returning home to her student's hall of residence in Headingley, attacking her with a blow to the head before removing her clothes and stabbing her repeatedly in the chest and eye with a screwdriver.
To me, she was a sister. I mean, we shared a bedroom. She was obviously at university. She'd been there for nearly 3 years. But, you know, I don't remember us ever arguing or anything. You know, she was really good at art. The whole family was good at art, that sort of thing. She liked books and things.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
She was a gentle, kind person,
yes,
wasn't she?
Yeah, she was, yeah.
Time.
I mean, and I'm still in touch with some of her friends now, which is nice as well, yes.
If they'd listened to me and sat me down and, you know, really got me to talk, that could have been prevented. And I do feel responsible. But it was devastating when Jacqueline Hill was murdered.
How would you like your sister to be remembered?
Well, I think for any of the victims, you know, they were just everyday people. And I think that the use of the long shadow, the name, is good, because to me, all the victims are coming out of the shadow. You know, it's not about Sutcliffe anymore, and they were real people. We're hoping that Leeds Council are planning a memorial to them and other victims as well. So that's hopefully in the planning, yes, yeah. But I suppose what our family do, we, we're all happy to talk about it, you know, yes, yeah.
It was just days later on the 25th when Sutcliffe's friend and his unwitting getaway driver from the assault back in 1969, Trevor Birdsal, finally reported him to the police as a potential suspect, writing an anonymous letter to the authorities. Quote, "I have good reason to know the man you are looking for in the Ripper case. This man has dealings with prostitutes and always had a thing about them. His name and address is Peter Sutcliffe, 5 Garden Lane, Bradford Clarks Trans, Shipley." End quote. This letter was now marked as priority number 1, and it turned out that the police actually had evidence against Sutcliffe for a while, but it always seemed to be missed. The investigators had compiled a series of index cards to detail suspects and evidence, and Sutcliffe had already appeared on 3 of them, but these remained in a filing tray, quote, "for some inexplicable reason," end quote. Regarding the delay of an arrest and the loss of vital evidence over the years, Inspector of Constabulary Lawrence Byford stated, quote, "The failure to take advantage of Birdsal's anonymous letter and his visit to the police station was yet again a stark illustration of the progressive decline in the overall efficiency of the major incident route. It resulted in Sutcliffe being at liberty for more than a month when he might conceivably have been in custody. Thankfully, there is no reason to think he committed any further murderous assaults within that period." End quote.
You were glad that he was caught, and you would have wished that he'd been caught right at the beginning.
Absolutely.
But is there in any sense, as a father, a feeling of tension, a partly still a feeling of, in any way, being on his side and
no,
being...
not as regards what he's become. I mean, to me, I probably think of him much as you do now. But I also remember him as he was, which was a completely foreign to what he eventually became and what he is now.
It was on January the 2nd, 1981, when Peter Sutcliffe was stopped by the police and was in the presence of 24-year-old prostitute Olivia Reevers in the driveway of Light Trade's house on Melbourne Avenue in Sheffield, and they may have saved the young woman's life. The car had false number plates and he was arrested and transferred over to Dewsbury Police Station, which is when he was also investigated regarding the Yorkshire Ripper case. The next day, Sergeant Robert Ring revisited the location of Sutcliffe's arrest and discovered a knife, a hammer and some rope, which Peter had previously discarded behind an oil storage tank after telling the officers he needed to urinate. He then hid a second knife in the toilet cistern of the police station. Investigators obtained a search warrant for his Heaton home, and Sonia was then brought in for questioning.
Well, I was so able to be so calm when the police were questioning me, you know. I said, "Oh, I'm dying for a wee, so I'll just go for a wee." So I did, and I put these implements in behind blower bush. I was going to throw them over the wall, because there were some woods nearby, just over the wall. But I didn't, because I thought it might make a noise and they might realise, you know. I didn't hear anything. They took me back to the police station at Sheffield, and then they searched me and didn't find anything, and then they realised, one of them realised that I'd gone for a wee, and so he went back there and looked.
It was really strange when Peter Sutcliffe was caught. Of course, I honestly had no communication with the police. They weren't coming to me to say, yeah, we caught him, this is the man who tried to kill you, because they said that it wasn't Peter Sutcliffe who'd attacked me. So I was still in a frame of mind that my attacker was still out there. So I couldn't get over that. I didn't have any justice. I couldn't feel safe. And every time I went into town, I would get my keys and put a key through each finger and made a fist. So if I saw the man again that had attacked me, I would, be able to attack him back. As the media went on and his face appeared on the screens, that's when I recognised. And I was at home alone in Liverpool, recuperating from my injuries still. And I saw his face and I thought, that's the man. I fell to my knees. I couldn't believe that the person who'd attacked me was this notorious serial killer.
Upon a strip search, he was found to have been wearing an inverted V-neck jumper under his trousers, with sleeves pulled over his legs and the V-neck exposing his genital area. The front of the elbows were padded to protect his knees, which they presumed was so he could kneel over the bodies of his victims. Sutcliffe initially denied being responsible, but on January the 4th, 1981, after 2 days of intensive questioning, he finally confessed to being the Yorkshire Ripper.
Most extraordinary series of confessions to 13 murders and 7 attempted murders of women. Almost chapter and verse.
He admitted his guilt, of course, with diminished responsibility, and that's where the element of psychiatry and the law would clash. How much of Sutcliffe was responsible for what he did?
It was only by sheer fluke that I got caught. It wasn't through clever detective work.
About 10 or 12 years ago, he did confess to one young lady who he attacked. So they managed to get a confession out of him. And Chief Constable Keith Hallowell did go to him and ask him if he had attacked me. And the Chief Inspector knew, Sutcliffe knew, but Sutcliffe was not going to say anything. So he was holding his cards close to his chest.
He calmly described his calculated attacks and would even later claim that God told him to kill. Quote, "The women I killed were filth, bastard prostitutes who were littering the streets. I was just cleaning up the place a bit." End quote. He only ever showed any remorse for his youngest victim, Jane MacDonald. He did show some emotion when questioned over Joan Harrison, but denied being responsible for her death, and it was later proven to have been the work of sex offender Christopher Smith. In May 1981, Peter Sutcliffe pleaded not guilty to murder, but guilty of manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. He claimed to have been the tool of God's will and that voices told him to kill whilst working as a gravedigger, claiming that the voices came from the headstone of Polish man Bronisław Sapolsky. However, he did plead guilty to 7 charges of attempted murder, which was accepted after 4 psychiatrists diagnosed him with paranoid schizophrenia. But Judge Sir Leslie Boreham had an issue with this and demanded a detailed explanation for this reasoning. This led to a 2-hour representation by Attorney General Sir Michael Havers, a 90-minute lunch break and another 40-minute discussion, only for the judge to completely reject the diminished responsibility claim, demanding a jury.
Because of the judge overturning the agreements between the doctors. He overturned it and brought a jury in, and when they found me guilty of murder, it meant all those other things as well that are not true. You know, like he said then, a predator. Well, I'm not at all, I never have been. I was trying to stamp that sort of thing out when I was on my mission. They said it was a sex act to stab them in the chest or whatever. And, you know, and that was ridiculous. They said it was a malicious motive. Well, how else do you stab somebody, you know?
If I start imagining being evil, it takes me into that arena of negative emotions and negative things and thoughts. I'd rather believe that he was ill, because then that's more palatable, shall we say. So I don't think it's as clear cut as one or the other, but I'd rather think about and decide that he was ill rather than evil. Although I have to say, you know, he did some evil things.
Do you ever process it?
Like, do you think you ever, like, is it something that's always there?
No, it's always there, and that's one thing Richard McCann as well has said, it's just always there in the back of your mind, you know, and every day you might do something, but then something will think about it. Yeah, it is, it's just always there, yeah.
The trial lasted for 2 weeks, in which Peter Sutcliffe was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to 20 concurrent sentences of life imprisonment. The jury rejected the claim of paranoid schizophrenia, as a prison officer had overheard Sutcliffe tell his wife that if he could convince people that he was mad, he might get 10 years in a loony bin. The judge described Sutcliffe as being beyond redemption and hoped that he would never be released.
Well, he wasn't convicted for what he did to me. So he got off scot-free with what he did to me.
He was found sane during the trial but was still diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. It was considered a possibility to send him to a secure psychiatric unit, but this was denied. Peter Sutcliffe changed his name to his mother's maiden name, Conan, and resided in Her Majesty's Prison Parkhurst. While the majority of Peter's siblings have removed themselves from the public image, his brother Carl has often spoken out about the case, but admitted to having had mostly positive memories growing up with him. Quote, "He was great with me normally. He was a brilliant brother. He'd buy me presents, take me to the pictures and the skating rink. But I do remember there was one time when he held me by the feet out of the bedroom window. I thought, he's not going to drop me, but he did, on my head. I had a twisted neck and had a real sore neck for weeks." End quote. Regarding finding out about his brother's arrest, he stated, quote, "I looked over this lad's shoulder who was reading the paper and there was a picture of my brother's house. It said they had caught the Ripper and there was his house. I thought, bloody hell, that's our Peter's house. We talked about the Ripper with my brother all the time. Bloody hell, he used to take my girlfriend home." End quote. Carl also dismissed Peter's claims of hearing voices in his head, saying, quote, "Why would you get yourself alibis if you didn't know what you were doing?" End quote. Once convicted, on January the 10th, 1983, Sutcliffe was assaulted by 35-year-old criminal James Costello, who was convicted of several cases of violence. He followed Sutcliffe into the hospital wing after recess before plunging a broken coffee jar twice into the left side of his face. He required 30 stitches to recover, but survived.
What do you miss most about being free then?
Oh, I miss being able to, well, it's not the same now. You can't drive freely here. There's traffic jams and all that. I miss driving and I miss seaside holidays.
Yeah.
Just the normal things, you know, stroking a dog.
I'm going to ask you something silly now. Do you miss sex then?
Yeah, I certainly do, yeah.
You do?
Yeah. Well, they've just knocked on the door, Hope. So
have they?
A quarter of an hour's up, darling.
All right then.
Anyway, I'll speak to you again, I don't know when I...
This is where I keep the Sutcliffe letters and cards, whatever, ranging from 89, coming all the way through the 90s, leading up to the year 2000. There's probably 500, 600 letters here altogether. I keep everything on file. Original letters and copies of letters, a variety of letters from me to him. Fascinating archive into the way this man thinks and the way he operates. Dear Diane, hi. Well, what can a guy say? If only you knew I'm an ogre, not by a long chalk. Mind you, I'm fully aware of what a horrid, distorted picture the gutter press have tried to paint over the years. They haven't the least idea of the personal tragedy from my point of view and the absolute hell it was for me all those years. My initial reaction was, I don't know about a horrid, distorted picture. There's no denial of the killings.
In March 1984, Sutcliffe was relocated to Broadmoor Hospital to better suit his mental health conditions, and 5 years later his wife Sonia finally decided to separate from him, finalising the divorce in July of 1994. On February the 23rd, 1996, Sutcliffe was attacked once again in Broadmoor's Henley wardroom by convicted robber Paul Wilson. He asked Sutcliffe to borrow a videotape before strangling him with a cable from a pair of stereo headphones, but again he survived. On March the 10th the following year, he was attacked yet again by inmate Ian Kay, who assaulted him with a pen. Sutcliffe lost vision in his left eye whilst his right one was severely damaged. Kay confessed to trying to murder him, and he was detained in a secure mental hospital until further notice.
That day there, yeah, for me, was like a scene out of Silence of the Lambs. The guy who done it, yeah, I was talking to him just before. It's a big dinner night tonight, and it's steak, it's cauliflower steaks, there's chips and peppercorns. So Peter's there sitting down going like this, and he's walking up and down like angry. So I said, sit down, man. He goes, I don't want this food, I want liver. So his liver. You know, you have to order that from the kitchen. It'll probably be tomorrow now. So he looked at me and goes, no, that's what I did. I cut someone up, disemboweled somebody, and I hit their liver. So I'm like, bro, like, you're gonna talk like that, yeah? Leave me alone, because I'm having my food. Later on, we'll talk about all your mad killings and all that, yeah? I won't say his name, because obviously, you know, but he ain't having it. So he's come up behind Sutcliffe, held him there, took his eye out with a fork, and ate it. So the nurse is standing there like that, and the pus from the eyeball was gone into her face. She's ran off the ward, all the staff ran off the ward, left all the patients there. So I don't give a shit, man, I was eating my dinner now. Peter's there crying, the cord of the eye is still connected to him there, like, you know, it was savagery. But then once I saw that right in front of me, I just thought to myself, I can't never be on point in there. So every day that I was there, I always thought to myself, what is the last thing you're going to think if one of these psychopaths kill you? Let it be about God. Let it be about your mum or your family or your granddad, because you don't know when you're going to die.
It was in 2004 when Sutcliffe's father passed away at the age of 81. According to Peter's brother Carl, he died still believing that his son was completely innocent. On January the 17th, 2005, Sutcliffe was allowed to visit Arnside, where his father's ashes were scattered, as he was accompanied by 4 members of hospital staff. His sister Anne passed away that same year, and allegedly not long after this, he began to fall out with the rest of his siblings, who were reportedly, quote, sick of the way he made everything all about him, end quote. Despite this, his older brother Mick told the Mirror newspaper, quote, our dad said Peter should have got the death penalty when he was sentenced. I suppose my dad was right in a way. We wouldn't have so much hassle if he'd have got the death penalty, end quote.
When people start talking about the ones he killed and the ones he didn't kill, because I know, and the police know, that he didn't do all the murders that he was convicted for. They got him to admit to them, to clear their books, and they promised his solicitor that he would not even stand trial. And if you remember, when he was taken to the Old Bailey, it was stated that there was already a place for him in the parkers at Liverpool. They got it all ready for him to go straight into without trial, and it was Lord Justice Boham who insisted, over the head of the chief of the jurisdiction. Yeah. He went over his head and demanded that there be a trial, for which the press were endlessly thankful. But Peter had been persuaded to admit to everything that they put in front of him.
Well,
now I know he didn't do them all. He told us that when we went to see him. He says, you know, I didn't do them all.
Things wouldn't improve for Peter, as on December the 22nd, 2007, he was attacked yet again by inmate Patrick Sarita with some metal cutlery as he shouted, quote, you fucking murdering bastard. I'll bind your fucking other one, end quote. Sutcliffe managed to fling backwards, avoiding damage to his right eye, though being hurt on the cheek. It was on February the 17th, 2009, when it was reported that Peter Sutcliffe was finally fit to leave Broadmoor. On March the 23rd the following year, the Secretary of State for Justice, Jack Straw, was questioned as the public wanted reassurance that Peter Sutcliffe would remain in prison. To which he responded, quote, that all the evidence that I have seen on this case, and it's a great deal, suggests to me that there are no circumstances in which this man will be released, end quote. Surprisingly, an application was actually submitted for a minimum term to be sent, offering the possibility of parole if it was considered safe to release the man to the public. However, on July the 16th, the High Court issued him with a whole life tariff. He will never be released.
When you've survived something so horrific and you've known that you've been so close to death, it actually gives you an edge in a strange way.
After conviction, he admitted to 2 other aforementioned assaults, but was never charged with them. Quote, "This was a campaign of a murderer which terrorised the population of a large part of Yorkshire for several years. The only explanation for it on the jury's verdict was anger, hatred and obsession. Apart from a terrorist outrage, it is difficult to conceive of circumstances in which one man could account for so many victims." End quote.
Hang every bastard prisoner for murder and give the money that you're spending on a prisoner. I know how much it costs to keep the Ripper. Get rid of them all, kill them. We can then sort out the pensioners and the homeless with the money we're saving on them arseholes in prison. Kill them all. I'll hang him. I'll pull the rope now, for what's sake. It wouldn't bother me. I would hang the Ripper tomorrow. I'd smile at him while I did it. I'm a victim of the Rippers. I found one of his bodies. Hang him. Hang Huntley. Hang all these child murderers. Hang them all. And then the money that you pay in prisons for these people. And plus the other thing, the outrage of it all is they've got human rights in prison. Homeless have got no human. Where's the homeless human rights? Why is a man who can kill got human rights? A person sleeping on the street has got no rights. You cope with that and I'll give you the answers where I'm coming from.
Psychological reports described his mental state as being taken into consideration, as were the severity of his crimes. On August 4th, 2010, Peter Sutcliffe filed an appeal against the decision, which began on November 30th, but denied on March 9th the following year. The West Yorkshire Police were widely criticised for their poor handling of the investigation. It was one of the largest investigations in British police force history, which predated computers. All information was stored on handwritten index cards, and it became extremely difficult to maintain the huge amount of information in physical form. The 1982 Blyford report wrote, quote, "The ineffectiveness of the major incident room was a serious handicap to the Ripper investigation. While it should have been the effective nerve centre of the whole police operation, the backlog of unprocessed information resulted in the failure to connect vital pieces of related information. The serious fault in the central index system allowed Peter Sutcliffe to continually slip through the net." End quote.
Following the injury and knowing that there was this man called the Yorkshire Ripper on the streets, I did not want to be associated with that kind of serial killer mass hysteria that was going on. At the time, the Yorkshire Ripper was seen as a serial killer who was cleaning up the streets of women who were working in the night. So it was for the sex industry, for women who were on the streets. And for some bizarre and twisted reason, the police in the early days thought, let him do it, let him carry on. He's doing society a favour. You know, these women aren't really worth that much. Their lives aren't worth anything. And then he started to kill women, students, housewives, all kinds of women from all walks of life.
I was ashamed. I wasn't even ashamed after it all happened and growing up of saying who my mum was. Yeah, and that's always angered me, the way that they made that distinction.
I do strongly believe that if they'd listened to me and investigated me and taken my case more seriously, that Jacqueline Hill would not have been attacked, and they would have found who was then known as Peter Sutcliffe. They would have found him and put him under lock and key. They wanted to take photographs of my injuries, which they did. And then he tried to take a report, and then at the end of it said, well, if we're going to take this seriously, we'll come and interview you again. And I was, take this seriously? You know, I could be dead if people hadn't interrupted this attack.
They were also ridiculed for focusing on the hoax tape, ignoring eyewitness accounts and survivors' testimonies, which allowed Sutcliffe to remain undetected for even longer. The public also lambasted the police for seemingly blaming women, suggesting they all stay inside rather than punishing the male attacker, including alleged misogynistic language. Quote, "The perpetrator has made it clear that he hates prostitutes. Many people do. We as a police force will continue to arrest prostitutes, but the Ripper is now killing innocent girls. That indicates your mental state and that you are in urgent need of medical attention. You have made your point. Give yourself up before another innocent woman dies." End quote. Furthermore, the mother of Sutcliffe's last victim, Jacqueline Hill, complained to the police for failing to use reasonable care to apprehend him, to which they apologised. Quote, "Some were prostitutes, but perhaps the saddest part of the case is that some were not. The last 6 attacks were on totally respectable women." End quote. Despite Sutcliffe confessing to several murders, it's believed that he was responsible for many more, which matched his MO, but this remains unconfirmed. There were around 60 murders or attempted murders around the UK in which Sutcliffe could have been responsible for, but he was eliminated from suspicion of 40 of these thanks to his lorry driver log showing that he was elsewhere at the time. However, he was still suspected of being involved in 22 other unsolved murders. After being questioned further, Sutcliffe did confess to 3, proving that he had lied about responsibility previously. It was in December 2015 when he was assessed and concluded to have been no longer mentally ill. By August the following year, a medical tribunal decided that he no longer required any treatment and he was able to return to prison, relocating back to Her Majesty's Prison, Frankland. By 2017, the West Yorkshire Police launched Operation Paintball, investigating further if he was responsible for any other unsolved murders. On November the 13th, 2020, Peter Sutcliffe passed away at the University Hospital of North Durham at the age of 74 from COVID-19 and diabetes-related complications after receiving treatment for a heart attack. Sutcliffe had faced a number of underlying health issues previously, including obesity. None of his remaining family members attended the funeral. The only in attendance was his ex-wife Sonia, who had since remarried, as well as a funeral director.
My initial thoughts were disbelief, because we had heard last year that he had a heart attack and was going to die and never did. So I checked, and then obviously it was confirmed, and mixed emotions. Not sure. Nobody prepares you for that surreal experience, but not celebration is one thing I will say, and that might have been something I would have felt as a young adult. I'm 50 now. I'm 51 actually. I'm matured, and what I realised is anger and revenge and all that's not good for the soul, so I let go of that 10 years ago. Strange emotions. I went up to tell my wife, and I hugged my wife, and we're getting on. I actually picked up the phone to Carl Sutcliffe, his brother, and sent my commiserations, condolences. Carl Sutcliffe wrote to me many years ago when he read my book about my journey and felt some compassion for me. So, as much as he did those horrible things, and he wasn't Peter Sutcliffe wasn't his greatest fan. I'm getting tongue-tied. Carl wasn't Peter's greatest fan, but it still was his brother after all, and I felt like I owed him that compassion.
But what caused this man with a troubled upbringing to take out his frustration on completely innocent women? At what stage in his life did he finally snap to the point of no return? While his family continued to live on with the memories and grief, and the survivors lived to tell the tale, they and we as a society can do nothing but continue seeking answers.